All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Tyler King, the college sports reporter for the Denver Gazette. And as promised, going to be doing a bit more video content for college football this season. Obviously, everyone knows I have my podcast, Basketball in the Mountains, which I post all of the episodes here on my YouTube channel. But obviously, it is football season and it's right around the corner. We're recording this on Tuesday, the 26th. The Buffs kick off their season on Friday, the 29th, at home, and Colorado State begins their season on Saturday night in Seattle against Washington. A late night kickoff. I believe it's 9 p.m. Mountain Time, 8 p.m. local time there on the West Coast. So it's like I said, it's here. We're getting ready for. We are all ready for college football season. I gave my 12-team playoff predictions in the Denver Gazette over this past weekend. You can go to denvergazette.com to check that out, or over on my Twitter page. I've got the graphic up there as well if you just want to kind of take a quick glance at my picks for the season. It should be a very fun season upcoming here, kind of wide open. It feels like going into this college football season. I had a tough time kind of narrowing down the 12-team field and really picking a winner there. So that was a pretty fun exercise if you want to check it out there, like I said, over at denvergazette.com. We did a video earlier this month with my good friend Caleb Bluefinger, did kind of a betting analysis, a betting outlook for both Colorado and Colorado State, as well as kind of the Big 12 and Mountain West as a whole. And today we're going to be talking specifically about Colorado State, getting ready for a very important 2025 season for Jay Norvell. His fourth in charge of the Rams, had that breakthrough season last year, getting to the bowl game, winning 8 games for the first time in over a decade. It was impressive run for that team to kind of close the season after, I think they started 2-3, losing at Texas, losing to the Buffs, and then they lost, at Oregon State as well. So, but this is a very kind of a new look team for these Rams. There's a new defense coordinator with Tyson Summers, who I wrote about earlier this month with one of my college football insiders for the Gazette. He replaces Freddie Banks, who was the DC for the first 3 years under Jay Norvell, but now he was moved on. He was let go after last season, and as Jay Norvell wants to play a little bit different style of defense, and there's a lot of new faces on both sides of the ball, and obviously with the coaching staff as well, as is the territory when you have a new coordinator brought in on one side of the ball. And to preview the 2025 season for CSU is my good friend Justin Michael from DNVR. Justin, how's it going? Appreciate you doing this.
It's good, man. I'm excited. I'm just ready to have real games to talk about. I think I've given every hypothetical scenario that there possibly could be for CSU about 15 times this summer. But I mean, when you live and breathe, and when you do this on one team for a living, you get a little repetitive at times.
Yeah, it's well, we are going to give some hypotheticals on this during this
No,
video
it's
here.
okay. It'll be fun.
But yeah, it is a long summer. The build up to college football season is kind of unlike any other sport. It feels like, because maybe the NFL is a different beast, but that's almost at this point become a 12-month sport, with kind of how constant the news cycle is for the NFL, with all the off-season training programs they have and stuff, on the draft and free agency, all that kind of stuff. But college football is getting close, but we do still have that June, July, August period to really ramp up and talk about people and practicing in pads for a couple weeks, and now it's kind of real this week. I want to start off by just kind of getting your thoughts from the end of last season, because obviously, like I mentioned, CSU goes 8-5 last season. Obviously, losing the bowl game in the fashion they did to Miami of Ohio, the Snoop Dogg Arizona Bowl, maybe put a little bit of a damper on what was otherwise a really fun season and a breakthrough season, like I mentioned, for Jay Norvell up in Fort Collins. Just kind of what was your feelings after that? And obviously, when you make a defensive coordinator change, it doesn't typically come in such a successful season like that, but it felt like it needed to be made at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it was just one of those things where, like, they definitely made massive strides in the right direction. As you mentioned, the record was the best since 2013 or 2014, I guess, and they did a lot of things that we hadn't seen in a long time. Beating multiple Front Range rivals, beating Air Force in the spring since 2002. I struggle with how much stock to put into the bowl game, just considering the portal now, and I mean, you lose multiple starting receivers. Like, there were legitimate things that worked against them. That said, that was the last taste that everybody was left with. That's the final note, after also dropping the game against Fresno and blowing the opportunity to make the title game. So I just think kind of the combination of that over the last month of the season maybe puts a little bit more pressure on this season than there probably should be objectively, considering the like the things you can point to in terms of tangible growth over the last couple of years. I just don't think there'd be a lot of coaches in Norvell's spot that would seemingly be not on the hot seat, but like still trying to prove themselves, it feels like. But it really does kind of feel like the make or break year for the Jay Norvell era here at CSU.
Yeah, that was going to be the first storyline I kind of wanted to touch on, because obviously CSU is preseason number 4 in the preseason media poll. They came in at 4th in the Mountain West behind Boise, UNLV, and San Jose State. I think I had CSU at 3 in my poll that had them behind Boise and San Jose. UNLV not too impressive in their opener, kind of needed a comeback to beat Idaho State in week 0. And they had no players on the preseason All Mountain West team, which kind of surprised me a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of new faces and everything like that, but I thought there were a couple of guys that could have gotten on there. Just kind of, you mentioned this. This is obviously a very important season for Jay Norvell, and the first question I was going to ask was, is this the biggest season of his coaching career? Obviously, he's only been a head coach for about 9 years now, but dating back to his time in Nevada, there's a smaller of a spotlight there than there is at CSU with just the expectations and everything. But like you said, the Pac-12 is looming in a year, and you want to go into that with momentum of some kind, whether that's off an impressive season or with a new coach, and all the momentum that comes with that. So do you feel like this is the biggest season for Jay Norvell in his coaching career, or at least head coaching career?
Yeah, I think it has to be, just considering the fact that you're coming off of an 8-win season where you did all these things that hadn't been done in a decade. And yet, like I said, we're still here basically in prove it mode with a large portion of the fan base. And I think that I believe in what Norvell is building towards probably more than the majority of the fan base seems to be. I lean probably more into the optimistic lens of things. Just I think there are certain factors you have to consider, like the portal and stuff like that have worked against them. It is legitimately tough when you lose 6 starting receivers to the portal over 3 years. Like
Yeah.
you get some momentum rolling, you get some rapport and chemistry between the QB and the receivers, and then you're hitting the reset button. And last year, you're doing it multiple times in season after thinking you're going to have Horton, and then he gets hurt, and then you get some chemistry going, but then Goody and Jamari end up, hitting the portal before the bowl game. It's just been so wonky. But yeah, I think in order to like really be confident that Jay's going to be the guy for CSU in the Pac-12 era, which I do think adds more pressure to this whole conversation. Like they've got to make some real noise this year, and I think they've got to be in contention for a conference championship. I think a hot start in September is really necessary. Like if you come out of the gate, even 2-2, but if you get, throttled by Washington and like don't even show anything against Washington State again, like the last couple times you played them, I think you put yourself in a pretty substantial hole when it comes to just the public perception and how that all plays into this. And it would just be really nice to see them capitalize and kind of get some early momentum rolling.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting to see what they look like in that first week 1 game at Washington on Saturday night. It's not Texas like it was last season, where I think you kind of know what that result's gonna be. That team has been one of the last 4 teams standing the last 2 seasons now, and is the preseason number 1 this season. Although Washington is a good team, I think they're going to be a sneaky contender in the Big Ten. I had them as one of my teams kind of on the outside looking in. I almost had them as maybe that 4th Big Ten team that could sneak into the playoff. But it'll be interesting to see what they look like in week 1, like you said, because you definitely want to gain some momentum heading into September, which is going to be a big month for this program. Obviously you expect to win the Northern Colorado game pretty big, but then you mentioned those 2 home games after that against UTSA and Wazoo. I think you're looking for at least a split there. If not trying to win both and get to 3-1, because that would be such an important start for this program, and I think could set the tone for the season, like you said. But I wanted you to give your your best and worst case scenarios for the Rams in 2025. Like, start with the best. Like, what do you think is the ceiling of this team? Like, how good can they be going forward here?
I mean, realistically, you're probably looking at best case 10-2. I mean, going to Washington and Boise is
Yeah.
tough, and I think there are a lot of other games on the schedule that are they're more like coin flips as well. But I think if you could get to 10 wins, that would be an incredible feat because this is a challenging schedule. I think it's more manageable early on in the year than maybe it was last year. Like you said, you're not playing Texas, and even by the time you played CU with Horton not being 100%, like the gap in athleticism was just kind of clear there.
Yeah.
But I think this is a good team. I picked them second, in the preseason poll. I do think San Jose State has a great argument, especially just given the schedule and who they don't have to play, like
It
CSU
was really
ending.
close for me between San Jose and CSU for number 2. Yeah.
Yeah, I just mean like, I wouldn't push back on anyone that is high on San Jose State. They've got a decent amount of returning talent, and I like what they did offensively this past year. But I just mean you've got a third year starting quarterback, right? Like that's pretty rare in these days. I think they're bigger and more athletic than they've been the last couple of years. How much that actually translates to wins, we shall see. But I like what I see, and I think in theory, third year quarterback, more diverse, group at the skill positions, maybe less dependent on one guy. You don't have Torrey Horton's ceiling as an individual player, but I think they'll be more well rounded because of it. As long as the defense comes together, which is a big question mark with all the turnover, I think they're going to be right there in the mix. Now, worst case is basically any scenario in which you were worse than last year. Like you've got 7 home games again. That's a
Hmm.
favorable schedule. Your road slate, especially early in the conference portion, is manageable, like San Diego State, New Mexico, those type of games. To me, like these
Wyoming should
first
be
eight
down again this
weeks,
year. Yeah.
yeah, like they really kind of dictate everything because I think there's a world in which you're sitting there at like 6-1 if you can win some of those games against
Hmm.
UTSA and Washington State. There's also a realistic path where you're more like 3-3, and I just think that would be a tough one to then get people to buy in later in the year, especially given the way you end the season, which, going to Boise and then home against Air Force is not a fun way to close out the year.
Yeah, yeah, I fully agree there. We'll get into our predictions at the end as well. I want us to each give a record prediction, but we're almost 13 minutes in. I haven't mentioned Fowler-Nicolosi's name yet. You obviously have alluded to him, but having him back is such a big thing for this team, and that's one of the other. It's probably the second biggest storyline behind the Jay Norvell aspect of it all is Brayden Fowler-Nicolosi. Like you said, going into year 3 as a starter. Pretty rare, especially for a group of 5 program in this day and age, to have a guy entering year 3 and he's only a junior. Like he could,
Yeah, he
he
could
could
be
very
forward
well, yeah,
technically.
he could be a 4-year starter who made one start as a true freshman in that first year as well with that Nevada win that they had, one of the few wins they had in that 2022 season. Um, for BFN, last year, obviously, he definitely took a step backward, and a lot of that was by design with how the offense transitioned. Like you said, with Horton going down pretty early in the season, they transitioned to leaning on the offensive line and the run game, doing a lot more West Coast style offense, really a lot of under center, bootleg kind of stuff, getting away from the air raid that has gotten Jay Norvell to this point. And it was so fun to watch Brayden in that offense in the 2023 season, even though he was a little bit turnover prone. The flashes of that offense were there. Now you had, both Torrey Horton and Dallin Holker as the 2 top weapons for BFN, and those 2 guys are obviously have departed the program in recent years. What are your expectations for him in year 3? Because it seems like they're going to open the playbook back up for him again this season, and maybe trying to mesh the gunslinger big play ability that he showed, as a redshirt freshman, and also combining that with the ability to limit turnovers and manage games that he kind of had to do last season as they went on that winning streak in the Mountain West play.
Yeah, I'm pretty high on Brayden coming into the season. I actually think he's the most physically gifted quarterback in the conference.
Yeah,
The
I would
arm
agree with that.
talent's always been there. He needs to find consistency. There's a million things that I think have worked against his favor, just with the revolving door at receiver and then scheme changes and some of the stuff that factors into all that. But he's flashed some moments of brilliance. I mean, he was great in that game in Boulder a couple of years ago in his
Yeah,
first,
he
start
was
after
really
taking over
awesome in
for
that game. Yeah.
Clay. Like Obviously, he was electric in the comeback against Boise State, really did it again against Utah State this past year. People
Yep.
just didn't really pay attention as much to that one. But he's a guy that when he's been able to get in a rhythm, he's showed some things in terms of throwing the football that I think very few quarterbacks at this level in the G5 are able to do. The big thing for him is finding consistency and what the offense actually looks like. I'm hoping that it's kind of a best of the both worlds situation. Like I don't think you just abandon some of the success that you found in the run game, especially with the talent you have in the backfield. I also think they have to strike a lot more fear in defenses, and they've got to be a team that can create far more explosive plays, and that kind of falls on him, assuming you're not just, breaking 70-yard runs all over the place. I think if this team is going to reach its ceiling, you have to trust him. And obviously, like, there is a scenario in which you trust him, you open it back up and it doesn't work out. And if that's the case, so be it. You put faith in your third year guy and you go down swinging. But I think they basically have to, if this team is going to be anything more than what they were a year ago, which was far better than what we had seen, but still probably a tier below like the true contenders.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. Like, I think if they're going to, like you said, go down swinging, you're going to want to do it with the guy who's got the most experience and talent, to be honest, like raw talent on the offense. Like you said, we've seen it from that first real start he made against CU early in the 2023 season. Like, I came away from that game as impressed as I could possibly have been that late, crazy, chaotic night in Boulder. And what we've seen from them is flashes of that and flashes of certainly not that. But I think if he's his third year as a starter and he knows the system by now, yes, like you said, the personnel, especially a wide receiver, has kind of been a revolving door. But you got to like the depth there and the talent that you have there with Kojo Antwi coming in from Ohio State. We'll see when he actually gets on the field this season. But Jordan Ross is a guy I'm super high on, and there's plenty of other guys I think could be difference makers at wide receiver for this program. So you got to, and like you said, I do trust some of the running backs as well. I think Jalen Dupree is a really could be a really good player. Really good player for this team. I'll talk about him in a little bit with some of my predictions. But I just think it's got to be Brayden that carries this team if they're going to be a true contender in the Mountain West, like they were at the end of last season. Like you said, one win at Fresno away from going to the Mountain West title game, where they admittedly probably would have gotten throttled by Boise, but you're still in the Mountain West title game, and that's an impressive feat in and of itself. So yeah, like I said, I agree. You got to trust Brayden to reach his full potential this season. And then if you lose him after this season, whether that's to the draft or to a bigger program, you've had 3 years with them. And if he delivers, a big season this year, I think that's more than worth it. So before we do get into our predictions here, I wanted to get your take on what are the 3 most important games on the schedule, not the 3 biggest games, just the 3 most important games that will determine how this season is going to go for CSU.
I think I'd probably go. I mean, Wyoming has to be one of them just because it's your biggest rivalry game on the schedule. You don't have a showdown. You're probably not going to play them the next 2 years. So it kind of feels like there's a little more at stake. And if you truly are going to be a contender, that's the type of team you got to beat, even on the road. So Wyoming is probably 1 for me. But 2 and 3 are probably UTSA and Washington State. And that feels weird in saying that, given that it doesn't impact, like, you could win those and still not come close to, competing for a conference title. But I just think you need that proof of concept. And I think a hot start would just be so beneficial for this team, because I think it does make it more realistic where, if you beat those, then it feels like, worst case, you're probably still winning like 7-8 games. And then maybe you do like get to that 9-10 mark. You lose both those games or even one of them, it's like, all right, like, we're still probably going to be in the mix, but who knows? So to me, those are kind of the tone setting matchups for this entire thing. What would you say?
I just not going to go like in order by importance, but just going down the schedule. I think UTSA is definitely one of my top 3. I'm not going to include Wazoo because I think that game is kind of dependent on what UTSA looks like. Because I actually think Wazoo and UTSA are similar talent-wise, because I don't think people realize how much Wazoo has lost since the last time the Rams played them. There is no Cam Ward on the other sideline like there was in the previous 2 matchups against that program. Even last year, John Mateer was a great player for that team, and now he's the starting quarterback at Oklahoma, and Ben Arbuckle, the offensive coordinator, went with him to Norman. They lost their head coach as well, so that's a lot of newness there. And I actually think UTSA could even be a little bit more dangerous than Wazoo. So that would be the first one for me, just because, like I said, I agree with you that you want to really get off to a hot start. You expect to probably lose at Washington, even if they're not like a super, a super, not even a preseason top 25 team, but they're still a Big Ten team with some real talent on that roster. You expect to beat UNC. And then, like you said, it starts with UTSA, that kind of run there where you have those back-to-back home games before they go. You have that Mountain West opener at San Diego State in early October on a Friday night. So I think UTSA is for sure one of them. And then I'm actually going to go with Fresno State in a couple weeks' time. Another home game against another team. I think I probably would have had them fifth. I think they were fifth in the preseason Mountain West rankings. I would have had them fifth behind UNLV, who I did have fourth. So I think that's just an important game to show that even if they somehow drop that game against San Diego State, who I'm not super high on going into this year, you got to bounce back or even continue the momentum against a pretty solid middle of the road Mountain West team that could, if things go right for them, also be a contender in the conference. So I think that's kind of a must-win game for this program. It was kind of between that one or Hawaii, because Hawaii had that impressive win to start the season against Stanford, and they go at Arizona this week, another former Pac-12 school they'll be playing. And I think Hawaii could be sneaky good this year. So I'll say UTSA, Fresno State, and then I'm going to end it with Air Force. I'm going to go with another home game, but there are 7 of them. And I think you just want to end the regular season on a positive note. And I think beating Air Force for a second straight season would be massive for this program, because I think Air Force is going to be a lot better than they were last year. Like last year was kind of a if not now, then when situation in terms of beating Air Force. And like you said, getting that first win at the Academy since 2002 was a huge deal. But now backing it up and beating them again, I think would set a real tone for what the rest of the decade could look like for both of these programs, because obviously they're splitting ways and not going to be in the same conference, but it's always fun to compare them just with how they are as programs. So I'm going to go with the Air Force game at the very last week on Black Friday at the end of the regular season. 3 home games, but those are my 3 most important games of the schedule. Anything stuck out to you with those 3, or the 2 that I had that you did not?
I get the logic 100%. I mean, I think in terms of perception and just being in, again, going back to that notion of proof of concept, like if you could beat Air Force and Wyoming in back-to-back seasons, that would be a pretty clear indicator that, we're not where we were. Maybe you're not where you want to be in the long run, not quite there, but clearly that would, to me, be pretty clear-cut proof of significant improvement, which is obviously the goal under Norvell here, and especially getting people to believe in him. I'm not as high on Fresno or UNLV this year. I just think the roster turnover was going to be tough for them. I took a lot of heat because in my preseason power rankings, I had UNLV 6th, and then, I was smirking a little bit over the weekend. I'm not taking a victory lap. Don't get me wrong. It's way too early in the process. But I'm really high on Air Force and Wyoming, Air Force and Hawaii. I had both of those teams in my top 5 in the preseason. Air Force, especially when you bring back, I think, 4 starting offensive linemen, it's just like, all right, so pencil them in for 8+ wins. And then Hawaii is just, I have faith in that offense. I still have some questions about the defense because of, like Stanford. I just don't know how great they truly are. But
that's not a very good Power 4 program. That's definitely one of the bottom 5, probably, if you're going by that metric. Yeah.
But hey, they were fun, and it was a fun matchup in week 0, and I kind of was banking on them to finally break through that glass ceiling after winning 5 games in back-to-back years. So I think any of those are good choices, but I think you got to put one of the rivalry games in there, and then it's kind of dealer's choice as far as those September, early October matchups go.
Yeah, you made a great case for the Wyoming game, just with what's all going to be at stake this year, and kind of the emotion that's going to be in that stadium. With likely it's the last one for a couple of years. It's just going to be a lot on the line, and the longest ever bragging rights that will be up for grabs that night in a couple months. So let's do predictions now. We've kind of doing a good job previewing this season, kind of everything that is on the table for this Rams team. Give me your record starting off. What do you have this CSU team at?
Again, I think range wise, like probably realistically 5-7 to 10-2 are all within the like
Yeah.
realistic realm of things with how many coin flip games there are. I wouldn't passionately push back against anybody who has, any of those predictions. I'm more optimistic. I have them in the 8-4 to 9-3 range. I think on my 25 predictions, I did 9-3, while admitting that would basically be almost everything went right for you. Like in that scenario, maybe you drop one, to Washington State or Hawaii or something like that. But 9-3 probably gets you in the conference title game. It would be, again, CSU's not won 8+ games in back-to-back seasons very frequently in their history. So I would be ecstatic if that were to be the case. But being realistic, the history probably says they blow 1 or 2 games that they should win, and 7-5 is probably the more realistic one. But I'm gonna have some hope. I'm gonna have some optimism. I'm gonna go full Ted Lasso, say believe, baby, and say they go 9-3.
I have them at 8-4. I think they
That makes me
lose.
feel good.
I think the two obvious ones, obviously Washington and Boise. I think those are the two, and then I think they split against UTSA and Wazoo in the first month. I think they win one and lose one of those games, and then I think they split the two of the tougher. They're not exactly really tough, but I think they win one or of San Diego State and Wyoming and lose the other. Just because the San Diego State game is a weird late night Friday night kickoff. That one could be weird, even though I think CSU is objectively better. And then even though I think CSU is also objectively better than Wyoming, that's a rivalry game, and there's going to be a lot going into that for another a night game up in Laramie in late October.
It's hard
Right
to win
around
there,
Halloween.
man. It's
Yeah.
cold. The wind is always blowing. It's going to be
Yeah.
late October, so I'm hopeful it'll be a little nicer than the last couple times we've been up there. But
Yeah, so those will be my four losses. I do think they beat Air Force at the end of the season. Like even though I am high on Air Force like you are. I think I did. I think I had them sixth in my preseason power rankings as well, and I honestly probably should have had them higher. So, but I am high on Air Force, kind of bouncing back this season. But I do think CSU is going to be able to get it done. Bounce back from a loss likely at almost certainly at Boise the week before, and end the regular season strong and get to 8-4 for a second straight season in the regular season. That would be, I think, more than enough for Jay Norvell to have won over the fan base. And I think if you go on a nice winning streak again during the season, you'll continue to get more and more buy-in from the fan base that this is real, that what Jay is building is real, and you'll get more of that financial backing that you just need in this era of college football to build a winner, especially going into a conference with more teams on CSU's level from a football standpoint in the new look Pac-12. That'll be more teams that are kind of aiming at similar ambitions in terms of what they're trying to do on the football field. So before we get you out of here, just wanting you to give me your quick offensive MVP, defensive MVP, and then a breakout star. You can do kind of one on each side of the ball, or just one overall for that. And there could be overlap too if you think the breakout star is an MVP as well. I considered a couple different guys for all of these spots, so I can go first if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead. I want to hear what you got.
All right, so my offensive MVP is just an obvious pick. I think it's Brayden. I think it's BFN. And if you had me maybe pick another that's non-quarterback, just because I think they're going to ask Brayden to do a lot this year because of him being the most experienced guy, I think it's just kind of obvious. And I do think he's going to have a solid year that does combine what we were talking about, all the aspects of the flashes and cutting down on the turnovers as well, the stuff that we saw, the game management stuff we saw last year. I think he's going to throw for over 3,000 yards. I think he's going to have a pretty solid touchdown interception ratio. And like I said, I think he's going to lead this team and be one of the biggest reasons they win 8 games. I think the offense is going to take a step forward and just be a lot more fun to watch than it was at times last season, even if the sickos love watching them pound the rock and dominate games. I think Brayden's going to carry this team to a pretty fun season. And the other guy would be Jalen Dupree, who I mentioned earlier, who I think is going to prove to be the key, pretty solidly the top running back on this roster. I think he'll prove that pretty early in the season and maintain that. I have always been a Justin Marshall fan ever since that big game he had in the 23 season against San Diego State in Fort Collins, but he's just been so injury prone and just kind of gets these little nicks that I don't know if he'll be able to be on the field enough to consistently prove himself. And like you said, I think Jalen Dupree is going to have a really big year. So that's my offensive side. My defensive MVP, I have Mukende Wakalonji, just one of the most experienced guys. I think he could be in for a big year rushing the passer. You just look at him. And compared to where he was when he showed up on campus, he looks like a monster. He's really bought in the weight room, and I think he's taken on a real leadership role this year as well. And I think he kind of understands last year college football. He's got a chance to ball out, and I think he could be a guy that gets 6, 7, maybe 8 sacks for this team, and be a real weapon for Tyson Summers defensively. Because I think he's going to let these guys try to get after the quarterback, and I think McKenday's got the biggest abilities maybe as a pass rusher on this team. The other guy I considered for defensive MVP, I'm going to include as one of my 2 breakout stars. I have one on each side of the ball. I have Owen Long on defense, who I think is just going to surprise a lot of people with how solid he is at linebacker. Playing as much as he did as a freshman last year was super impressive to me. Jay Norvell constantly talks about him. He's already been named a captain this early in his career. I think there's a lot of optimism about what he can be as a player and not just what he brings as a leader as well. So he's my breakout star that I also consider for defensive MVP. And then my other breakout star is Jordan Ross, who has probably had maybe the best camp of anybody offensively with some of the big plays we've seen him make in some of the scrimmages. I think he's a guy that will not be a consistent week to week, like 100-yard guy, but I think he's got the ability to take the top off defenses. I think he's going to have 3-4 big touchdowns throughout the season that are 50, 60 plus yards. I think he's just going to be a big play guy that maybe swings 2 or 3 games for this team during the season. So that's who I've got.
I almost did on one of my bold predictions earlier this month. I almost did that Jordan Ross won't have 1,000-yard season, but he'll have a 200-yard receiving game, which is along the same vein of what you're thinking here. Like, big play guy. I definitely think he's going to be a big part of the offense. I'll start breakout candidates. Offensively, I'm going to go Tommy Maher. I think he'll be just a very consistent piece of what allows this team to keep the sticks moving. I think just quietly you'll look up at the end of the year and it's like, oh, he had 70 catches,
I would say he might lead the team in catches. That might be my bet, to lead the team in catches.
850 yards and a couple touchdowns. Like, I don't think he'll be the big play guy, but I think he'll just be very, very steady. He's always open, great hands. He runs better than I think people realize. Like, in street clothes, he kind of looks like me out there, but then he gets on the football field and he just balls out, which is he's fun to watch. I think he'll be a fan favorite. Defensive breakout star, I'll go Jaquez Evans, donut coming over from Western Kentucky / Baylor. I think he's going to be a big part of the defensive success, and I think he's going to have a nice year rushing the passer. And then for MVPs, I would probably go Brayden, but since you made that argument, just for the sake of having it be a little bit different, I'm going to go Jackson Warren.
He's another guy I considered. Yeah.
I just think the ability to attack the middle of the field with more consistency, combined with the mismatch that he creates in the red zone, is really going to be beneficial for Brayden. And I think kind of Brayden breaking out and having the season we've talked about today, I think that kind of coincides with a big year from Jackson, and then Rocky Beers as well. I mean, he's going to play a ton. They're both really good. Defensive MVP, I am going to go Owen Long. And I'll give you a hot take. You can clip this if you want for the socials. Here's one. Owen Long, true sophomore, is the best linebacker in the Mountain West Conference.
I don't think that's a hot take. I think that could very realistically happen this year. I think he's that good.
I do too. After the Arizona Bowl, I was pretty bummed out. It was all these Ram fans. We all went out to Tucson. Everyone was passionate, like it had the opportunity to be this big moment. Feeling pretty bummed after the fact, obviously, but my most confident takeaway leaving that bowl game was that Owen Long is a star. And I think we're going to see him. You mentioned earlier in the season, or you mentioned earlier in the show, that there were no Rams selected to the preseason all-conference team. If Owen Long is healthy and plays in every regular season game, I would bet a large sum of money that he is on the all-conference team at the end of the year.
Yeah, having a veteran guy next to him in Jacob Ellis from Iowa State is going to be a big boost to him, just in terms of learning where to be and stuff like that. And I think that'll be a great partnership. But you just look at Owen and you see the athletic gifts that he have and the ability to make plays. Like, I agree with you. I do think he's going to establish himself as one of the better linebackers across the group of 5 level this year. And I think he's going to have a lot of people in his DMs at the end of the season trying to get him in the portal after the season. So, all right, Justin, I appreciate you doing this. This was great. Great look at this CSU season. I think it's going to be a fun one, and I'm looking forward to the first time I get up there to Fort Collins for a game. I'm not sure exactly when that's going to be. There's a lot of overlap with the Buffs this year. Maybe I'll get up there for the second half of the home opener against UNC after CU beats the crap out of Delaware. So
Isn't it great we don't have a showdown? Good thing we got that Delaware game in.
Yeah,
Just awesome.
I'm glad CSU plays UTSA and Colorado plays Delaware. I'm actually glad CU plays Wyoming this year. That's kind of an underrated game in September there. I think the Buffs will win pretty handily, but they haven't played each other since 2009. It'll be interesting to see two teams that are separated by like 125 miles play each other for the first time in a while. That'll be interesting. But I appreciate you doing this, man. This was a great preview for the 2025 season, and I'm sure you and I will be reconnecting at some point to talk about this team, whether it's gone well as we both think it could, or poorly, if that's the case as well. So, which neither of us want, just for content purposes. But appreciate you doing this, man.
Anytime, brother. We'll certainly be talking more, and always happy to hop on the show. And I'll definitely be hitting you up to come on mine soon.
All right, that'll do it from today's episode. Thanks again to Justin for coming on. Stay tuned later this week. Going to have a preview specifically for the CU Georgia Tech game on Friday night. Going to have a writer that covers the Yellow Jackets on to preview that game in depth, and then we'll have also a Buffs season preview as well with one of the more notable members of the beat in Boulder that I've gotten a chance to know the last couple of years. So looking forward to both of those. Like I said, thanks again to Justin for helping me preview the CSU season here, and stay tuned for the Buffs content coming later this week.